Hi, Holly. I am delighted to have finally caught up with you. You read my book a couple of years ago. We've connected. I think we've had a phone conversation or two, exchanged messages. Now we've got you on the Fundraising Talent Podcast. I'll be out on the West Coast at some point and I'll buy you a cup of coffee in person. But for now, we're going to have this conversation on the podcast today. Before we dive into our topic of discussion, how about we just ask you to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Thanks, Jason. It's such a pleasure to be here today. I really appreciate it. I did read your book a couple of years ago, and it was one of those moments where I read it and said, yes, this is exactly what we need to be doing. So it's a real pleasure to get to meet you. Right now, I'm serving as the very proud president of Presentation High School, which is an all-girls Catholic high school in the heart of Silicon Valley with about 700 students, and I've been here for about 18 months. It's been quite a journey, and oh my, if only we had known back then what was going to be coming down the pike. So it's been full of a lot of exciting challenges, but a really great community to serve, and really especially to focus on community building and what that can do to really move the school forward. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you today. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and I noticed too, I noticed earlier in our communication, you've got a search open right now. You're looking for a chief advancement officer. Am I right? Tell me a little bit about that.
You are so right, Jason. We are in the midst of a search for a chief advancement officer. I come from the advancement world. I've spent a lot of time in that area. So it's a really fun opportunity, I think, to find a great partner for me as we are working to begin this new chapter for Presentation High School. And I think it'll be a lot of fun to find somebody who loves this work, who's really mission driven, but who wants to help take an institution up to the next level. So I'm excited to find somebody, and we're very open, and it's a new moment for the school. So I think it'll be interesting to find somebody who really resonates with what we're doing over there. Thank you.
Yeah, well, that's really exciting, and we get about 300 downloads a day. So most of them are fundraising professionals. So maybe they'll be after they hear us talk today, they'll be like, "I want to go work for Holly." So we'll see if we can help you out with that.
That would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll turn this into we'll see. I'll be very interested to see what sort of responses you get after this conversation. We'll see how good you do, Holly. We always ask our guests to come in with a big idea or bold opinion. You've read the book. You and I sync up on some key ideas. But what is it you think we should talk about today? It is for the sake of our listeners. We're recording on the day of the inauguration. It is a time of transition. We're hoping we're on the back end of this pandemic, but we really probably assume that it's going to linger into the summer. It is certainly a period of transition. What's sort of on your mind this morning?
Jason, thanks for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. I woke up this morning bright and early, and I have a daughter who is 6 years old, and so this is a really poignant moment for so many of us. As women with daughters, I'm in an all-girls school environment. Yep. This couldn't be a more special day, and I felt this sense of great hope and gratitude for what this chapter is going to bring for the country, and gratitude for these women, and then also this just moment of concern for our country too, as we're trying to move forward. And as I watched this morning, I was really touched by seeing so much purple in the crowd and thinking about what that means in terms of unity. And as I think about where we're going forward as individual organizations in the midst of kind of hopefully coming out of this pandemic, it is that concept of unity, and as I like to say all the time, partnership, that is going to carry us forward. There's so much that is on our plates that we've got to figure out how to bring the right people together and really rally around mission and values and vision of where we're going, with hope and joy, of course, and to really bring all of that together and support each other to go out and do the good work. And you could be in a nonprofit, you might be in a school, you could be in a variety of different organizations, but I think we are collectively experiencing this challenge together. And for those of us that do this work day in and day out, we are very hopeful people who believe that it is going to get better. And through the work that we're doing, we're going to be able to make real improvement in the world. And so I'm very hopeful today. Really.
Yeah. As a father, so my wife and I, we have four children, two of which are girls. And my older daughter, she's 16 this year. And I have to tell you, I think what I have become much more sensitive to and aware of during the last 4 or 5 years as Christina is her name. She goes by the nickname Teeny. So if I refer to her as Teeny, that's who she is. Christina is sort of come of age in this Trump era. And I think I, as a father, as a man, and as her father, have become much more aware of sort of what the world is for her. And I'm listening to sort of how she's processing experiences and the way things are sort of, just how present we are as men in this world, and how much we sort of insist on our stubbornly dig in our manly heels and insist on our way. I have to imagine you've got some thoughts coming from the world you're in, and coming, being where you're at. What does it mean to be a woman in leadership right now?
Thanks, Jason. That is such an important question. And I think as a woman who is also kind of at the beginning of my time of leading this institution, I think about it often. There's a great deal of responsibility that comes with that. And, there's a great deal of expectation and challenge too. And so I think for me, again, I would come back to, I think, the call for women to lead, to be that example, and to do it in a way that lifts others up, and that really is that constant reminder of the strength in being together. We say strength in sisterhood at presentation, but the need to really have that arm out and to know that we can't do it ourselves, right? Alone, we can't do it alone. Mm-hmm. And so I think, again, back to unity, it's really such an important time. And as women, I think we can see that. We can see that really clearly. But I also would say, to your point of, what does it mean to be a woman leader today? That responsibility means we have to realize who we're following and who we're setting up for the future, and make sure that we continue to lead with integrity and with heart, and to continue to challenge ourselves, mm-hmm. to rise and to be that example. It's a position of privilege, and it's a position of challenge all the time. Where you're being questioned, and there's challenges about them. But
yeah, I remember a conversation. I come from very conservative roots, and I remember a conversation I had with my mother a couple of years ago about some opinions that she had discussed with my daughter, Christina, and I said, "Mom, I don't think you're sort of connecting the dots between the world that Christina, she's coming of age and she's realizing who she is, and she's doing in this particular era of time." And my wife and I were sitting last night as we were watching President Trump's sort of saying, sending us all well and good, and we're all saying, "See you later, pal." But we're also talking about our 12-year-old daughter, our younger daughter, Mary. And I'm curious to hear from you. So my daughter Mary is like one of the younger girls in your class, one of your classrooms right now. What are you saying to her if she's probably not? Christina, my older daughter, is much more aware of what has transpired, but my 12-year-old is probably not as aware. Probably hasn't paid as much attention. And there's probably some things that now that I have done the last 4 years with my daughter, my older daughter, I'm thinking, okay, what do I want Mary to pay attention to as we now see the first woman entering into the role of vice president? That's some extraordinary stuff that I want my daughter to see, both my daughters to see, and certainly my sons as well. If you were in one of your classrooms, what would you be saying to those younger girls right now?
Thanks. That is the moment that we're in right now, is to see this time for what it is. And I think to push away some of the political conversations that we're having and the challenges around this, and to say, let's take this moment and take it in for exactly what it is. A woman of color has been elected by the people of the United States to serve as our vice president. Collectively, right. We said, yes, you are the one we believe that should do this. And there's such incredible just optimism and hope in that, and you can do this now, right? You can do that, and if you don't want to be the vice president, you can do so many other things to help make this world a better place. And at presentation, we are built around the Catholic teachings, the tradition of the Sisters of the Presentation. We have a motto where we talk about not words but deeds, and that means that you've got to go out and take action. And I think that's this call of this moment for all of us, but for these young women, is to aspire to think about what you can do and how you can make tomorrow better than what you're experiencing today. And I think we have to be honest about the challenges and about the difficulties and about the negativity that we are swimming in right now. And we need to call that out, and we need to, but at the same time, we have to continue to paint the picture that it can be so much better, and it will be better. And I think that's where we are today. My daughter's only 6, but she also woke up with a lot of excitement. She actually lost her tooth this morning. And so we said, Millie, you will always remember the day that Kamala Harris became the vice president. This was the day you lost your tooth. But she was even just filled with joy and excitement. And I think that's the moment that we're in. But we have to challenge ourselves to say, we are better. We are better than what has happened over the last 4 years, over the last 2 weeks. But we are better when we are unified and we're together around the values that we have.
Okay, so when I was writing that book, I really appreciated our conversation we had a couple of years ago after you read that book. Part of what I was trying to do in that book is I was trying to write I always introduce that book as sort of an honest yet hopeful critique of where I thought the fundraising profession needed to go. And in some ways, to think about in relationship to this idea that we're in a period of transition. You're that individual who picked up the book. It was very thought-provoking for you. We're talking about our daughters. What if your daughter right now, your 6-year-old daughter says, I want to grow up and be a fundraiser? That's that hopeful critique that I was sort of offering, is that some of the stuff that I have sort of experienced in my fundraising career, some of the stuff that was less than meaningful, I would have to say, isn't the stuff I would sort of say to my 6-year-old daughter, yeah, you should grow up and be a fundraiser. What would you say to your daughter right now if she said, Mom, I think I want to be a fundraiser one day. I want to be your chief development officer at I want that job.
It'll be interesting if she will ever say she wants a job that I've had, just so you know, Jason.
Okay.
So much, and she's a girl of a lot of individuality. But I think if anyone were to come to me to say I want to be a fundraiser, I would say, how lucky you would be to get to do this job and to do it well. Finding a place that you love so much that you can get out and talk to other people that are inclined and interested in supporting and investing in what you're doing, and to be able to do that on a daily basis. What an amazing opportunity. And what, back to mission and action, I think if you can find that place that you love so much, and you can go out and help garner the resources in the community and the people to make it a better place and to do more with that mission, you've left a great legacy as well. So I think it's an incredible opportunity. That's the most optimistic view of it, right? And then there's all of the minutia that ties us down and drags us away from that work that we started all of this for.
Yeah. One of the titles, one of the chapters in that book, and I don't know that I've shared this with you, but and I'm still lingering on, maybe if I update the book and put another chapter or two in it, would have been a chapter that I would have entitled something along the lines of a fundraising CEO. Mm-hmm. And a lot of my clients historically have been in the private school space like you're in right now. And I think one of the challenges, I'm very interested to hear your thoughts on this. I think one of the challenges that we face certainly in private education and really in many ways across the sector, throughout the sector, is we have these CEOs, individuals in the role like you're in, that are so programmatically oriented. So they're so much more oriented towards the delivery of the mission that they really drop the ball on their fundraising responsibilities. And not even so much that they have to be the day-to-day person soliciting money all the time. Not that they have to always be the person in front of the donor, but they just don't have their heads on very straight when it comes to what it means to raise money and sort of be that representative and that advocate for what it means to be a donor. Have you seen and observed that in your own space? And I have to imagine you sort of grasp the tension that I'm talking about.
Oh, I think I do, absolutely. And I imagine if you were to talk to any chief development officer, they would say, I can put all the best work together, but if I don't have that authentic partnership and access to my leader, CEO, president, whoever it may be, head of school, it's going to fall flat. And that's what I was thinking about when I was thinking about this leadership opportunity. We've got to work together. It has to be that lockstep of partnership. And what I can say now, having sat in both seats and having now greater empathy for both, is in this seat of CEO and leader, there are so many conflicting, urgent priorities that really do have to be dealt with. And so working with the advancement director to have each party understand what those pushes and pulls look like, and to find that regular cadence of how we keep this work of fundraising always on the front burner and always happening on a weekly, daily basis, but also that the rest of the work can be tended to, right? Because to me, the work that we do in inviting individuals to join us and invest with us, I have to feel 100% confident that when I receive that gift, it's going to be a sound investment. And so that means I have to have great confidence in everything that is happening at the school. And when we have that happening, then we can really go out and do great things. So my hand is involved in so many of those other parts right now that's an interesting tension that we have. But I think I was looking at something where we don't always build every organization built around the fundraising mechanism, but yet we've got to have that posture all the time. And so as I'm starting this new work with a new person in the position, I think we've got to design that together. Is how do we make sure that we each know what's needed and where we're going, and that we can make sure that I'm always prioritizing that work as we need to. It'll be interesting to see too the balance of working with a chief advancement director and a president who has the experience in advancement, but is saying very clearly, hey, you're going to be the leader, you're going to do this work, and we're going to partner together. And so I'm hoping that my perspective and experience will help open up more opportunity to do this with other leaders of the school, with the board, and really pull the full community together, because it's all about building that culture of philanthropy that we've got to do together, and it has to come from me. I do understand that.
Yeah, I think if the private schools have taught me anything, it's their inability to distinguish between what I call and you're totally going to get this because this is your space, the tuition paying parent and the major donor, who generally happens to be a grandparent, more often than not. And I think it's some of the, I'm oftentimes sitting with I'll be doing a board development seminar or something with like a board, like at your school. And I'll talk to them about the difference between the gala and the golf tournament and who shows up for these things, and why some schools would be better off double downing on the number of golf tournaments and completely eliminating the galas, because the galas tend to be those places where mom and dad show up. And they're usually behaving like consumers and they're buying things, but they really are thinking, I got to pay tuition next month too. Have you seen in your work, and I think that's why the idea, this is where I'm getting at with this comment. I think the notion of a fundraising CEO excites me so much for where our sector could be going. And why I like to see the idea, and we're seeing this trend in other sectors as well, not just in education, of people coming out of the fundraising ranks and ending up in executive roles like your own. But you know how to differentiate between that major donor and that tuition paying parent. And you understand that there are differences of expectations, and you know that they don't want to get a newsletter that talks about drop off and pick up. And, you know about all these. I mean, I've had major donors tell me that, they're saying things like, I really don't want to hear about all the things that my adult son or daughter are concerned about on a weekly or monthly basis as it relates to my grandchild. I just want to know that my grandchild's having a great experience and is going to be the next president of the United States, sort of stuff. Very big visionary sort of things. You got to get that, right? I mean, talk to me about that.
Oh my gosh, Jason, you're so right. And I think the broadening of our community is what you're really talking about, right? In that it's going to, and the life cycle too. So you're going to have your current parents, which yes, we've got to spend time with them, and we've got to really make sure that they feel great about what's happening for their child. But then we've got to build out this community, and we have to find ways to authentically draw them in and make those connections. And then exactly what you're saying, especially right now, right? They don't need to know every detail of our COVID plan, but they want to know we've got a visionary concept of how we're going to be doing hybrid learning that's going to really impact their child's experience and keep them safe so that they can see their grandchildren at some point throughout this whole process, right?
Yes.
And so really making sure that we're able to differentiate this. And that's what your book's about, right? We've got to meet every group where they are, think about their perspective, and help them understand how that connects with the work that we're doing. So yes, and then I really can't go a minute without commenting on your piece about events. And that was another part that I was in a moment when I was reading your book about how are we going to get through the balance of, yes, we've got to do these events and they're important from a community standpoint, but they're pulling every ounce of energy from my team. And we're not getting to that next layer of how we can utilize the golf tournament to make those initial connections and then do the next level work. And so, I think that for a lot of schools continues to be this moment of transition for us. And if any silver lining with the challenges of this pandemic, the elimination of so many in-person events means that we've got to really get back down to the brass tacks of what do we need to do to connect and create these meaningful opportunities, and we're going to only focus on those essential things. So I feel really optimistic about where we're going as we navigate that work too.
It's interesting having this conversation. In 200 plus broadcasts, I don't think I've been able to have this conversation this way with what we'll call a very enthusiastic reader. And I get to sort of share with you some of the behind the scenes and some of the thinking that was going into the book that maybe you weren't aware of. But one of the other things you'll recall from the book, Holly, and I think this certainly relates to this idea of this search that you're in the midst of. But you'll notice, you might recall that I didn't really address the whole board dynamic a whole lot in the book, because I really don't think it matters all that much. I think what we've done, I think some of the things that I would sort of critique my colleagues in the consulting and advisory sort of space is that they have mistakenly put so much burden and so much responsibility for fundraising on the shoulders of the board. And that when, in fact, if you want to have a thriving, robust fundraising operation, it's really going to happen between you and the chief development officer. And whether that chief development officer has a large staff or whether they're just a staff of one, it's really that dance between your office and theirs. And I think we have, and I think also where this becomes very problematic is it doesn't allow again, because and anybody else who read the book will remember this as well. I did not address the board dynamic largely because I don't think board members are being allowed enough. When we double down on their role, on the board members' role in fundraising, we don't allow them to be major donors that oftentimes they want to be. And so what I want to see some advisor friend of mine or something, some mentor of mine once said that he felt like it was his obligation in your seat. He was speaking from your seat as it relates to the chief development officer to ensure that the chief development officer could see the board wearing the hat of a major donor, of somebody who wants to contribute in a very generous way, and not get that chief development officer's head all wrapped up in the governance of the organization. Does that make sense to you?
I think that's an interesting point. And we've been doing some work, you don't know this yet, but we have a brand new board of directors at presentation as well. And so we've got 13 very enthusiastic members of our board who are very focused on governance, but they're also very strong supporters of the school. And so they are wearing both hats. And I think as I do this work, even in my role, I need to see them as governors, my boss, but then also work with donors. And so we've been doing a lot of work with them to really sit down and have those individual conversations, sit down with their spouse, with their partner, and have a conversation very, very focused on being a donor, not about the board stuff. And so that is an interesting just sort of two worlds in which they live. And I think, to your point on how can we best engage a board in this work of philanthropy for the school, it begins with their personal commitment and if they're leading by example to make that investment. If it's a commitment that they're making to serve the mission, to do this work of governance, we want them to make that investment. And then I think as I think about the lanes that you have and kind of how we can really leverage them, it's being that sponsor and that advocate, right? And so some of that is through introduction work, but we don't want them to feel like they also have to always be, calling in favors and asking their friends to do this, to support us in the same way. We want them to invite them to learn about the school, and then we're going to take it to that next level. Yeah. So it's very interesting. It's a good point that you make. Absolutely.
Yeah, and I only speak to this because I've been in your seat as a head of school, and I've also been in the seat of a chief development officer and a major gift officer. And I think the mistake that gets made, and I'm sure you've either heard about this or experienced it yourself or something, and it's great to hear that you've got this new board because they can be sort of encouraged to think this way, or at least inadvertently knowing that we're thinking this way. But you want the board, through the lens of the chief development officer, you want the board to be thought of as generous. And oftentimes, when you're thinking of the board as it relates to your role, Holly, you're thinking them of your boss, which doesn't necessarily always jive and mix with being generous, right? They get to fire you. I mean, they have the authority to hire you, evaluate you. Generous isn't necessarily the word that comes to mind. We're not saying that they're not doing their job or they're all bad people. It's just that generosity is not what sort of comes to mind first. And I want your chief development officer to be thinking of your board members as generous. And if you look at it that way, you're also acknowledging that they're being generous with their time just as they are with their financial support. And I have known so many development directors. Again, I've never written about this, but it would certainly fit into that fundraising CEO sort of chapter. So many development directors get their heads wrapped up in the whining that the CEO is doing behind a closed door about their board members. And I'm like, don't you get it, Mr. and Mrs. CEO? This person's actually trying to help you get that payroll up or get that budget met or whatever. And here you are whining about those board members. You get it, right?
No, I do get it, and I have a board that is wanting to be very generous with their time and their talent, and also with their investments in the school. And I am incredibly grateful for that, but it's not without challenge too. And so the insider behind closed doors portion of that, I think, is back to what we were talking about in terms of partnership. And I think what you're also getting at is that filter of keeping the pureness of the opportunity to have that type of relationship.
Yes, beautiful. Yes,
with your board. And I want everyone to see my board in that way. I want everyone to feel really excited about what they're doing for us. We're doing some work to think about how we can engage the board with the faculty and staff, and I want them to see them in the very same way, right? Of incredibly strong supporters for each of our faculty and staff members, and really generous believers and supporters in the mission. And so sometimes it gets a little bit lonely in this role of being the president, because we have to have that foresight to recognize our words matter and our reflections matter, and they can have great influence on how the rest of the work goes. And so you've got to be careful about that.
So I've kind of turned this inadvertently. I've turned this into an interview for the boss. So Holly, do you know how to? One of the big things I think when I think about if I was critiquing supervisors, they don't know how to get out of the way. Do you know how to get out of the way?
Do I know how to get out of the way? I appreciate that very much. And if you asked some of the folks that work with me, they might say yes, absolutely, and others might say I'm not so sure. So
well, when it comes to a chief development officer, more often than not, if you hire the right person, you probably need to get out of the way more than you don't. Yeah. Especially if they've got because in many ways they have to be. They're like your peer leader. I mean, you're essentially championing them, essentially to be the CEO of their own sort of division with their own sort of constituency, much more oriented towards that major donor that we're talking about, as opposed to that tuition paying parent. In some ways, you work for the tuition paying parent; they work for the major donor. Yeah. You've got to be able to get out of the way. Am I right?
You are spot on, right? And I think it begins with that mind meld and that partnership, right? Once you've got that connectivity and you're working and walking down the same path together and sharing a plan and a vision, then absolutely you've got to get out of the way. And in fact, I feel like I work for them to a certain extent to say, wind me up and send me out. Where do I need to go? Who do I need to talk to? What do we need to say? How can I help you close whatever it is we need to close, right? And I'll plug into that whenever, however, you name it, I will be there. And I will be ready to do it with a great deal of enthusiasm and passion. So that idea of how do you use this position to the benefit of the goals and objectives that we have in advancement is really, I think, super fun and exciting. I'm looking forward to doing that work together. But I think that's how, that idea of almost working for them, right? I am a tool that you can use, and I want to be that partner to reach those goals with you. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Holly, it makes perfect sense. If I didn't have other aspirations, I'd be applying for the job myself. So And I've got this book project, and I love teaching at the local college, so I'm going to probably stay put. But I've got some people in mind. We'll certainly send them your direction. If there's somebody listening today, we've got to wrap this up. We only keep people's attention for about a half hour. If somebody's listening today, they want to reach out to you. Maybe they're interested in applying for your job. How would you suggest that they do that?
Jason, thanks for just this overt plug. I appreciate it. Send me an email, and we can. I'm sure you can put that out there on the website when people link for the podcast. Send me an email. Let's set up a conversation. And I think it's you've got to be somebody who is excited about our mission and who believes in the direction that we're going in. And so that's going to be best served by a conversation between the two of us. And I'm excited to talk to anybody who might be interested in partnering with me in this. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, this wasn't a setup for sake of our listeners. This wasn't a setup. It just so happens that we decided we're going to experiment with this. We'll see how this works out. Holly, it has certainly been a pleasure. I can't wait to get to the West Coast when sort of the clouds break and buy you a cup of coffee. I'll be in the Silicon Valley soon enough. In the meantime, you're always welcome back.
Jason, thank you so much. You are welcome to come visit us at presentation. We will have that cup of coffee and spend some time together. I am very enthusiastic to see more about what you're doing with this next book. And if you want to write those next 2 chapters, I think you really should. I was leafing through the book thinking I need to buy a few more copies and get these out. So I am a great fan of your perspective and philosophy, and I hope that we will be able to inspire others to pick it up, because we are so challenged right now with our work and seeing the difficulties that we're having with our economy, but also recognizing that there are amazing acts of generosity happening, especially for different institutions and services with great mission. Fundraisers now are so important to make sure that we all survive this time. And so I would just want to stop before we wrap and say thank you to everybody who is doing this work. It has been harder than ever to be a development person, to be a fundraiser. Know that you are serving a really important mission, and if you're not thanked every day, several times by your boss, you really should be, because this is very, very hard work right now. Keep it up. It's super important. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure, Holly.
All right. Thanks, Jason. Good luck.